see, did that work? All right, our mic's on, great. Welcome. We are gonna go ahead and get started. Right now, we're gonna move straight into our delegates. And today we have 5 delegates lined up. I'm gonna go ahead and give our delegate statement up front. So if you're speaking, please pay attention. Thank you for your interest in addressing the Hamilton County Board of Education. During your presentation, please address the board as a whole, not individual board members or administrators. Also, please do not present complaints or concerns you have about an individual employee of the school system. If you wish to voice those complaints and concerns, you should contact the central office and ask for a meeting with the superintendent, since the superintendent is responsible for individual employees. Please limit your remarks to 5 minutes. You'll be able to watch your time right here on the clock. I'll tell you when you have 1 minute left. And I do want to just really emphasize this statement. Please do not direct your comments to anyone directly here on this board or anyone within the administration, or we will ask you to leave the boardroom. Okay, first up we have Jeanette O'Markell from HCA. All right.
They're just standing up here.
Great, you may begin.
Good evening, Hamilton County Board members. Thank you for letting us come before you tonight. This month, the Hamilton County Education Association submitted 1,553 signatures of certified educators in the district, more than enough to trigger the PECA process. PECA, the Professional Educators Collaborative Conferencing Act, as you know, is the Tennessee law established in 2011 that formally outlines how districts and educators can work together to create a binding memorandum of understanding that covers educators' salary and wages, fringe benefits, grievance procedures, leave, insurance, dues deductions, and working conditions. The next step in this process is the creation of the Special Questions Committee, which you will vote on tonight. This committee will design the ballot with the questions required by law, approve those who are eligible to vote, select a method of polling certified employees, and monitor the results. Last year, we used SurveyMonkey to conduct the poll, but there were several technical issues during the process, and several educators felt disenfranchised because the SurveyMonkey emails were not sorted to their primary inbox. After much discussion between our attorneys and months of delay, the district had to plan, implement, and administer a second voting window, even though they were not at fault. We learned some lessons from last year's experience and have some suggested solutions that will be presented to the committee for consideration. This year, we will be proposing and offering to fully pay for a complete third-party elections service called Votum. This will simplify the process for both the district and the teachers and put the election in the hands of people whose full-time job is running elections. All parties will have access to the data and the results. The result will be a free and fair election in which all eligible employees will have an equitable chance to participate, and it won't cost the district or taxpayers a dime. I personally look forward to continuing our collaborative work with the district and educators to create the best district with the best working conditions and learning conditions in the state of Tennessee so that we can ensure we can attract and retain great educators. This supports the district's strategic plan, ensuring that our students are successful because we have strong teachers and leaders to support their learning. Our students deserve an education without limits. Thank you. Do you have a question?
What did you say it was? I'm sorry.
The voting?
Yeah.
It's called Votum. I gave information to Scott, VOTEM, votum.org. It is a federally vetted program that they use in many states.
Okay, I've never heard of it. Thank you.
I hadn't either till they told me about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, our next speaker is Moses Rodriguez Cruz.
Good afternoon. I first want to start out by recognizing, thanking, and bringing into the space every single Latinx, Hispanic, Latina, or Latino community member who collaborated in the process of crafting the letters that I'm here to present regarding the comments made in the Chattanoogan about Latinx students. First, I want to apologize to my community that you cannot be here because the school board meeting is currently inaccessible to our community. 4:30 p.m. is hard to make for working class families who have children in school. I also want to apologize to those that wanted to make it but didn't come out of safety concerns. I want to apologize to you because not a single elected official, decision maker, or person in power took the time to reassure our community, all Latinx and Hispanic folks, that we are welcomed at the school board and that we have a right to speak. But above all, I want to thank them for their trust, love, and support, and entrusting me to share some words with our esteemed board members this afternoon. I am a graduate of Hamilton County Schools. I'm originally from Mexico, and I have lived in Chattanooga my entire life, and I went to college in Chicago. I graduated with honors with 2 bachelor's degrees from the University of Chicago, one in comparative race and ethnic studies, and one in gender and sexuality studies. But before reading my comments about the letters, I'd like to briefly share an experience during my time in Hamilton County Schools. 19 years ago, right around this time, I was in the breakfast line on my first day of kindergarten at DuPont Elementary School. I was frozen, clammy, completely confused about where I was and what was going on. And I remember standing in the line, shaking with my hands clasping that hard plastic tray, and someone shouting at me, all while having absolutely no idea what was going on and having to fumble and mumble as I tried my very best to quote-unquote speak English. Months later, I realized that cafeteria staff was asking, "What do you want for breakfast?" But that wasn't after months of carrying around a dictionary, having to beg my neighbors to help me with my homework, being written up for not participating, which actually were trauma responses and anxiety attacks, and having at the same time to wear the hats of translator, financial manager, and liaison. Luckily, after a year, I was able to learn English, but what stands out for me from those years is the visible struggle and frustration in my parents' faces, as well as other parents because of the language barrier. But I want to thank them because despite the barriers, they were always there. Be it an assembly, a school meeting, an open house, conferences, my parents and our parents move mountains. They miss work and they risk it all to be there. Esteemed school board, it is no secret that our immigrant community in Chattanooga has tremendously grown and positively impacted and changed our city. Unfortunately, what hasn't changed is that to this day, Latinx students and families are facing the exact same challenges that I faced 19 years ago. What hasn't changed is that instead of being supported, listened to, and above all met where they're at, county officials instead choose to frame us as a burden and instead talk about the fact that we are that tax dollars are being spent, and I want to know what's wrong with that. We have 3 demands that are clear. One is accountability from the school board. None of us in our community know who you are. So I ask that you create a task force composed of parents, teachers, students, educators, and y'all selves so that you actually meet us, talk about the situation, and we can develop solutions together. 19 years ago, or 40 years ago, or this year, Playa v. Doe was passed in the Supreme Court, and we're celebrating the 40th anniversary. Amidst this time in Texas public schools, the Texas legislator actually was denying enrollment to undocumented students and actually threatening school districts with losing funds if they continued to serve undocumented students. With elected officials framing the education of Latinx and immigrant students as a burden, and the state refusing to use quote-unquote taxpayer money to educate students who were not legally admitted in the U.S., the situation escalated. Eventually, the Supreme Court ruled that undocumented students were unequivocally protected by the 14th Amendment of the Constitution. While we cannot truly imagine that the past 40 years without this legislation, or this Supreme Court ruling, we do know that the sentiments, projects, and legislation that cultivate the exclusion and the criminalization of Black and brown folks, but especially students, has not changed. And you can imagine we were quite alarmed when a school board member chose the word burden, because this kind of apathetic and neglectful language is uncanny given the context of the case from 40 years ago. And it seems that these sentiments and this language from 40 years ago remains. Over the years, we have seen the impact of apathetic and neglectful attitudes towards Latinx and immigrant students from school board members and those meant to support and represent our students. More often than not, individuals trace it back to a number of different reasons, from the limited abilities of language to the lack of staff and funding. Rarely do these actually come with the recognition of the complex and intersecting identities and life situations of immigrants to this day that our parents face. So, with this bit and with the best interests of our students and community in mind, we present letters that we'll give to you before the end of this meeting with a collective of 1,102 signatures to ask for accountability and for action. Furthermore, sorry, I lost my space. We are in a historic moment here in Chattanooga. While we have not been present, our community has been carefully watching. We have been listening and paying attention. Not only are we watching, but the state, the region, and the country has its eyes on all of you. It's time for the members of the school board to decide which side of history they'd like to be on. It's time for the board to make it clear that no one is above accountability and that no one should be exercising this kind of language for people they claim to deserve. It is time for this board to open long overdue channels of communication and to take actionable steps to collaboratively address the root causes of issues impacting Latinx students and actually meet them where they're at. While some programming has been developed, Latinx community members have seen little to no proactive action to take action and to
Sorry,
meet
your
us where
time is
we're
up.
at. Thank you.
Thank you, Moses. All right, Amy Cecilian.
As difficult it is to talk about, racial discrimination has been alive and well in our lives, and those before us. From street vendors trying to make a living to having a black man arrested on the ground and being killed unrightfully. Unfortunately, this issue has been made into its way into the educational system. Many people of color have made history in this country by voicing their issues because many cannot comprehend how words and actions really hurt. So today, October 20th, 2022, this is us making history. People of color have gotten used to being told to go back to their country. It's almost as if we expect it to be told to us every time we step out of our homes. However, my teammates and I, along with millions who are not afraid anymore to be heard by these people, will not let a single word or action be excused. If we are such a burden or too much for the educational system, I promise you haven't seen what we're capable of. As a Latina in the United States, I would always compare myself to what was conventionally beautiful and how much I wish I had more opportunities as other people in this country would have. From society's word that indigenous features were not in right now, to learning that Latinas as a group had the lowest earnings of any major race/ethnicity and gender group. I always had this concept that in order to love myself, I needed to be perfect for society's outlooks. I remember that at only 11 years old, I was already thinking about plastic surgery and how I could just tweak a little bit here and a little bit there, just so I can be perfect. One day I walked to my sister's room and I saw her crying. I asked her what was wrong and she told me how much she disliked her appearance, more specifically the color of her skin. It then hit me how much pressure certain standards have convinced so many people of color, including my own sister, to not only hate their beautiful features, but most importantly, be ashamed of their roots. It took me years to grasp how powerful I am, regardless of any statistic or any study they've done to people like me. I have this vivid memory where I was looking at myself at the mirror and on a random weekend, and for the first time I saw how much of a beautiful woman I've become. I know I neglected my own roots and the love for my country for so long. I would have noticed how beautiful both of my cultures are and how amazing my people are. And I am proud to say that I am a Mexican Guatemalan American fighting each day to make sure that every child and young adult is able to feel that same potential. My parents came from harsh backgrounds, and regardless of how much they've endured in this country, witnessing how much they've accomplished, how much they've proved so many people wrong, shows you that regardless of your color, the ethnicity or your race, sexual orientation, etc., nothing's a limit. If it wasn't for those two people who helped me love the person that I am today, I wouldn't be able to get into NYU in Shanghai, China, grow and learn from trials and tribulations, and most importantly, make my roots proud and be able to say that I was the first, but not last, Latina to be valedictorian at Howard this past May. You know yourself better than others, and I'm just so proud to say that, being black or brown or Hispanic or Latinx, you name it, has gotten used to the feelings of being alienated and marginalized in the South, for Hispanics and Latinos is being told that to go to your own country. And maybe the educational system needs to realize what it's doing wrong or what has been doing wrong this whole time. Hispanic students are powerful. We are brilliant, talented, creative, and above all, we are attentive, smart, and always watching. This is only the beginning. I promise you, you haven't seen what we're capable of. Do your jobs for our community, especially students who hold you accountable. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. Our next speaker is Amy, and I'm so sorry, I can't read the handwriting very well, but I believe that it's Guglielmo. Can you make sure to tell me your last name, because I want to make sure I... Thank you.
It's Guglielmo.
Oh, I would have never gotten that right.
That's okay.
Thank you so much.
It's all good. I'll just dive into it. If the school board is complaining about the demographics of Hamilton County schools changing, then guess what? This is public education, and you need to accommodate, which clearly some school board members do not even believe in because they have been receiving complaints about behavior towards children and various communities in Hamilton County for years. All of the negative, festering comments we have received, emboldened by a disgraceful perspective on public education, which they work to attack rather than strengthen, can be essentially reduced to speak English or get out, a crowd that fails to recognize that the United States does not even have an official national language. Regardless of this, okay, you know what would help students learn English? More interpreters, translators, reading interventionists, and support staff, strengthening ESL services. And let me clarify, support staff that are actually paid decent wages to prevent turnover, because you have an epidemic of overly qualified staff that are out here working extremely demanding jobs and barely getting paid minimum wage, which negatively affects the students receiving necessary services and then adults complaining that they are not learning. Taking these measures would literally benefit everybody, including students struggling academically, any of them, since that is what everyone claims to care about. And I would just like to comment that as someone whose mother was a teacher and ESL educator in Hamilton County schools, who not only grew up attending entirely public schools in Hamilton County, but then went on to work in them as a literary coach and college mentor, and then as a disabilities paraprofessional, not once and not would I ever, or any decent teacher I know, view a student as a burden because they needed help. If I personally ever was struggling to assist students due to a language barrier, not once did it cross my mind to blame them or their family for their needs. What I did wish was that I had more training, had access to resources that would have helped me, or really had gotten any professional development at all. And none of those things are caused by the children whatsoever. They're caused by a lack of intentional and well-executed funding and consideration for staff, as well as a lack of hands-on involvement from officials who brazenly make comments about things they clearly know nothing about. There will always be students with IEPs, whether due to disability, behavioral, or linguistic needs. What would actually help them, instead of blaming them or their families, when you clearly have minimal real-world experience regarding their lives and struggles, and are unqualified to address these needs to begin with, is a real, tangible investment in accessible education from the adults who are responsible for the well-being of their education, which consequently includes all of you. If one cannot fathom solutions to this that go beyond scapegoating minors for being the victims of inadequate resources and adults who complain about their very existence, if that is how you view anyone who needs help or accommodation to reach their goals, the goals you set for them, and to thrive, you should not be working in any social services or education field, let alone with children. My advice to anyone that so openly discusses being incapable of handling this line of work ethically would be to bow out and let someone who is actually qualified and who values education equality to take over. And I will end by saying that we are here to present our letters and to file a formal ethics complaint. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. Our last speaker is Angela Favaloro. You can begin whenever you're ready.
Okay. Hi, I'm Angela Favaloro. I'm in District 5. Thank you, Chairwoman, and the board for hearing me this evening. I guess digging into policy is kind of where I live. So you guys have first read and second read, kind of where I live. So You guys have first read and second read packets tonight that you're voting on. So when you go into your work session, I would love for you to take some of these things into consideration. I will touch on what Sherry is handing you out, which is a Williamson County School Board's code of conduct that they use for their school board, and they have had implemented for over a year in relation to one of the things I'll speak about in a moment. The other things I have on my list, if we just went from first read, two things to address. You're looking at 3.201 safety and 3.205 security tonight. Some things that, in light of some great community conversations and a lot of conversations surrounding our police presence in our schools and how that relationship is with our students, what safety looks like in one community looks different in another, and how we solve that issue. Under the safety policy, there is, like line 31, it says the principal shall secure assistance from school resource officers and or law enforcement when he deems it necessary in order to maintain order or security during the school day. I would recommend that line just being gone. You all have added where they can ban people from the property, but in your security policy, you have defined lines under the principal shall notify the principal shall call the school resource officers, school safety officers, and or law enforcement in cases involving illegal entry, theft, or vandalism. I would love to see a task force within our school with representatives from different communities to clearly define what principals should be able to reach out to actual officers for. So that way there's no bias from community to community. We don't have any disparities or any gaps in what we're using law enforcement for, because maintaining order is just a really vague and really gray area that can lead to a lot of liability, like we've seen in one of our districts recently, or multiple districts recently. So I hope that you all pull that and have some really good discussion over it, but I really think our community is hungry to be involved in this conversation, and I think that it would be worth a listen and a conversation from all of you within the communities of how that is and come to a compromising situation. Moving forward, I would say some of the second reads you have for tonight are 1.107, the Code of Ethics, and 1.106, which are duties of individual board members. The Williamson County Code of Conduct actually kind of almost combines these. And I think it would be great to see how in-depth they go on their behavior with their relations with our community, fairly appraise and support both present and future educational needs, represent at all times the entire school community, which we have some of those in our duties. But putting that out there, because as parents, as teachers, as students, educators, administrators, everyone else in this district signs a code of conduct. And I think it would be a great relationship to know that we have that transparency and fairness with all of you, that we're all on the same page and how we all agree to parent, educate, work within the community together. And I think that's a good agreement that we could all possibly agree on and work together for. Instead of us being a duty, I think it would be great if we were a relationship. As far as something else that came to mind, and this wasn't actually part of my presentation, I kept hearing how from the groups ahead of me, we're talking about how the board feels about our migrant and Latino, Latinx community. And to me, it brings up one of your policies. When an individual board or the member or director of schools expresses their views on any issue which is in opposition of view expressed in board policy, they have a duty to make it clear that the view expressed is of their own and not of the board. And I think it would be really remiss if we aren't very clear on when we're reaching out to media publications and things like that, that we're very clear that we are not a representative of the board. Thank you.
Time's up. Thank you. Thank you to our delegates. We'll move now into our presentations. Dr. Robert. Yes, please, go ahead.
Moses mentioned that he had some document. Did you email that to us, Moses, or
I will have a physical copy for you, yes.
before the meeting is over?
I can also email.
Oh, I just was looking for it. I was,
Oh, yeah.
okay,
I have a physical copy, I will give it to you.
okay.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for asking. Okay, we'll move into our presentations. Dr. Sharp. Be giving a school safety presentation.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Robinson. Can you guys hear me? I'm not sure if this mic is.
It's a little faint.
Guess have to lean over like
It's
this.
on, yeah.
Okay. Good evening. Thank you, Ms. Robinson and board members. We're bringing to you tonight a presentation update on our current efforts in school safety.
Be sure it's turned on.
It is.
Okay, now turn on.
Okay, that's good. It's good. It's good, yeah. Thanks. So as you see, have we got a buzz going on over there too? I don't know. You got it? All right, good deal. I think we're ready. Sorry about that. As we begin with our presentations, when we come to you, we focus this work on our just cause as a district, and we want to ensure that all children are able to thrive and experience a future without limits, and that is our approach as well with our school safety work. This work falls directly under effective and efficient operations. It does reach out and touch some other areas as well, but I'm bringing it to you today because this is certainly work that is centered in my shop as part of the Future Ready 2023 plan. So we've developed a set of beliefs and commitments within our school safety division, which we feel aligns with the vision of the board and the vision and the work that the district has been involved in through the Future Ready 2023 plan. It's a set of beliefs that puts the value and dignity of every child at the very top. And we want to ensure that our children, when they come to school, they feel safe and comfortable, and our parents feel safe and comfortable as they send them off to school every morning as well. We're committed to building environments that allow students to feel and experience a sense of connection and belonging, and we feel it's our primary responsibility to create these systems to support kids, to support the well-being and safety of the whole child, and build structures to support that work in our schools. Over the last several years, the board, I guess this would be, prior boards and this board as well, have supported school safety in many different ways. Significant investments have been made in our school safety work during the past 4 years, and several of you have been a part of that work and decision-making that has brought additional resources to our schools. After the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas incident in 2018, that brought a new level of attention to school safety, and this board responded with additional investments. Again, this past spring with the Uvalde incident in Texas, you came to the table again and brought together additional resources to build and grow our security systems to support children. So I've taken those efforts and broke them down into essentially 3 different categories: investments in facilities, systems, and personnel. You'll be very familiar with all of these, or most of these. There may be some pieces in here that are new to some of you, especially some of our new members. So with facilities, one of our largest financial investments has been what we call the hardened entrances in schools. For years, schools were built with just a open welcome mat in the front door, and just anyone and everyone could walk in the front door and go visit the school. Well, the hardened entrance, what that does is create a vestibule or an entranceway that funnels visitors into the front office to add an additional layer of security to secure the main part of campus. So we're almost complete. We're in the final stages of adding those into all of our buildings, and we should finish that out. We will finish that out this school year, but that's almost close to a $5 million investment we've made in this work. Along with that, we've added secured exterior doors. When you visit a school now, if you have our staff will have the buzzer, the lanyard, or the key fob to access through the door. Visitors have to buzz in, and those door entrances also have a camera, so whoever's admitting our visitors into our schools, they can see who that person is on the outside, and then allow them to come in through the controlled entrances into the office. We also have installed an extensive number of security cameras in our schools. Right now, we're at 3,688 active security cameras in our schools. We have an additional 200 or 300 cameras that have come in recently that will be used to add in some places and to replace and update some older versions. And so we're continually monitoring that work and replacing old cameras with newer technology, and then adding to our camera coverage as well when we find gaps in coverage. We have systems that also we rely on for a safety component. Part of that controlled entrance is the Raptor Visitor Management System, and we ask all our visitors to present an ID and sign in when coming into one of our buildings. That creates a visitor's badge, but it also screens that individual for any issues that may be out there that we need to know about. We have the anonymous quick tip line that we rely on for information that could be of a security or a safety concern. This quick tip line is available to the public. It's in school websites, our district website, and we often are able to use information that comes through that quick tip line to do some quick intervention and solve a problem before it ever becomes a problem. And then the school messenger system is our primary communication system to parents that we can use for standard everyday kinds of communication, but it is also a very quick way to get a message out to our parents if indeed there's some type of issue going on at a school. Very large investment here, and one that has grown rapidly. Our school safety officers. We started with a very small number of school safety officers back in 2018, 2019. We've added to that this year to where currently we're staffed with 51 school safety officers. These are our employees that work for us. Many of them, as you know, are former police officers, have worked in law enforcement in different capacities. They retire, and even some now are just coming to us, and they see it as a very attractive, very attractive job that's in their line of work, but they're attracted to it because they get to come to schools and interact with students. All of our elementary schools have a school security officer, which has been a huge benefit that has come directly from the investment this board has made into security. We partner with the Sheriff's Office. They have 24 SROs, or SRDs, school resource deputies, we're calling them now. And they are in our secondary schools. You remember back at the beginning of, or back in the summer when we determined that they were not going to be able to fill all of their positions. The sheriff graciously transferred some of his funds into our budget. We were able to hire additional SSOs. We've hired all those as well. But we have a very strong partnership with the Sheriff's Department, one that we're building upon daily. We rely on the collaboration that we have with their team to help support our schools and deal with the issues that may arise. The additional counselors and social workers, and then our student advocates that we added this year, those are critical as well. 20 counselors have been added to our budget, 15 social workers. These folks have direct connection with our students. The same with the SSOs and the SROs. You know, it's our belief that the first and primary, most important safety measure in a school is the relationship that our teachers, our security officers, our administrators, our school staff builds with students. And when our staff is actively involved in building those relationships, building these positive relationships in a supportive, safe environment, we find that that's the best key for early intervention. And when we have that happening, we're increasing the safety, the well-being of our students, and it just continues to add multiple benefits. So at the same time as our officers, our SROs, our school security officers, they're there to protect, they're there to defend, but we also have learned that just as important, they're there to be with kids, to build relationships, to get to know our children, to learn about them. And we find them solving all kinds of problems with them on a daily basis and helping them get through the day. We've brought in some specific training over the summer for our safety officers and our school resource officers. We had a training this summer with the FBI. They came in and did a session, a day-long session on identifying indicators of mobilization. It's focused on these individuals who are prone to mass violence. And they've got tons and tons of research after all the years, and they came in and brought that to us. We had all of our SSOs, our school resource officers with the Sheriff's Department. We worked with the local Hamilton County Emergency Management System to support this training, and Homeland Security. We were able to secure a facility down at UTC, a big, large auditorium. We had all of the UTC security there as well, and we invited the private schools and all the other local municipal police departments as well. So we had over 200 people at that training that day. We've also partnered up with a group called I Love You Guys, the I Love You Guys Foundation. It's a organization out of Colorado that was founded by the mother and father of a young student, a young girl who was killed in a school shooting. And they have developed their foundation into one of the leading school safety and prevention groups in the country. We had 2 days of training with them this summer for all of our SSOs and our SRDs on the standard response protocol, and that's the process, the language to use when an incident occurs in the building. How do we talk about that? What do we do? And you may have heard some of the language already that comes out of that. If there's, for instance, a few weeks back, we had a situation where the police were after a suspect in a neighborhood near a school. So we placed that school on a secure status, which means everyone inside, monitor the exterior doors, make sure all the doors are locked, but keep on business as usual. Back in the day, that might have been called a lockdown or a soft lockdown. But there was no need to disrupt what was going on in the school, but we did want to secure the school because there was some things going on out in the neighborhood. So we're learning more and more about that as we continue to work with it. we've also been trained in the standard reunification method, and security personnel will tell you that once an event occurs at a school, whether it's an act of violence or it could be a weather-related event, say a tornado or something like that, the key moment is for school personnel is that reunification process with a parent and their child. So the I Love You Guys Foundation has a complete toolkit on how to do that, and all of our safety personnel have been trained in that. We're bringing this same group back in November, and our principals will bring a team from the school, administrators, maybe a counselor or a teacher to be a part of that training as well, so they'll get that firsthand. So we're excited about that. Like all the other departments out of here, we want to know how we're doing. What do people think about us? Are we doing what we need to be doing? We took advantage of the pulse check that went out to families in September, and our safety team said, well, let's go look at that data, see if there's anything in here that we could take out and learn about for our work. We knew there was one specific question that related directly to us, but we also looked at another question about just in general, how are things going for your students? This question was asked to parents. We were pleased to see that 72.2% of our respondents responded favorably. Now, we want 100% of our parents to be satisfied with their child's experience in schools, but we feel that 72% is something we can work off of. Very pleased to see that we were at almost 77% when it came to the specific school about asking parents if they felt comfortable with the safety measures in place. Again, it's not where we want to be, but we feel like we've got something to work from in terms of improvement, and we're continuing to dig into the data to look for ways that we can respond and make a visible response, so we'll even improve that number the next time we go through the year asking these questions. So we'll monitor that. That's about it. I know that's high level and trying to keep it under your 10-minute expectation. I don't know how I did, but if there are any questions or comments, you can ask them now.
Yeah. Mr. Perez?
So thank you, and thank you to the team that works toward that. Two things on the respondents. One, and I know that you all are breaking down the data, but 1,800 families is very little in comparison, but it might be a good sample. I'd be curious of the, let's say, 30% or 24%, why a group, and are there similarities within a group that may feel less safe, or schools or whatever. So as you break down the data, make sure that as we're talking about demographics, that all across, at least there's not a statistical difference as to why some groups feel safer than other groups, and if that's the case. And second, I do think that that one of our delegates' comments about perhaps a task force or a group that is just continually looking at safety and trying to gather information from multiple community members to be talking about this subject as an ongoing subject, not so much as a task force that's going to resolve, because none of this will be resolved the moment we move the needle moves again, right? And so something that's just a continual group of parents, educators, safety officers, administrators that are working together to always come down to, it really should be, safety should be something that all of us can go home after dropping our kids off and feeling like they're safe, where we know that we've left them somewhere safe. And I think that's the tragedies that we live, is realizing in a moment that not everybody can say that. So thank you. Thanks for your work, and keep up the good work.
Mrs. Black?
Hi, Dr. Sharp. I have some questions about staffing as far as the additional counselors and social workers. Are we fully staffed? Do we have open positions?
I don't have an answer to that question. I could get that for you, but I don't have that this evening.
Through the conversations that I've had visiting my schools in the district, it has come to my attention that we only have one multilingual school counselor and 2 multilingual school social workers. That's a problem. If we have 10 schools in our district who are majority ENL students, 5 of which are in my district, in District 11, all of our students deserve to have access and availability to all of the services that we offer in Hamilton County. We need to do a better job about hiring multilingual social workers and school counselors in order to serve our students, all of our students, well. I would like to see that made a priority. And if we do have any open positions, to actively recruit and seek out multilingual candidates to fill those positions. Thank you.
Mrs. Robinson?
Hi, thank you, Dr. Sharp. Going back to the 72% of the parents not feel like the things are going well for their students, what feedback did you hear the most? And what can we do to improve that?
So I'll address that. We actually had open-ended questions at the end of that whole survey, and we had a very large number of people that actually left comments for us to contact them. And so what we're doing as a senior leadership team right now is breaking those up so that we can get back in touch with families at the school level and then our staff at the district level. Shannon and her team are currently going through the trends and that data, as Mr. Perez said, to get the written feedback and actually see if there are trends coming from that written feedback. I would hope in the, I would say a week. She's smiling, so I'll say a week. We should have really good information about that. I'll remind you too about those pulse checks. We'll do those every month. So I know it sounds short, but we actually have another one coming up next week. And 5 of those questions will be on there every single time. The one about do I feel good about my student's experience is one that stays on. The school safety one actually rotates off, and we'll have 2 new questions, but we'll have the written response data soon.
Happy that you're working on it. But as far as safety measures, I mean, it appears that we're just doing everything that we possibly can. But what more things are suggested to be done?
Yeah, it's important to know that we have done
Just
a
ongoing.
great deal. Yeah, but it is ongoing, and part of our job is to communicate, better in our communication to our families about what actually we do have in place. You don't know if you don't know.
Yeah.
And there a lot of the safety work is it's behind the scenes, and things that we're doing every day. So I think that we can strategize on how to make that more visible with our families.
That's great. Thank you.
And communicate that. Yes, good point. Thank you.
Mr. Keene?
And I know the huge events are always on their mind, but more close to home, a lot of the emails I've been getting is still relating to school bullying. So I was just curious, the new program with the liaisons and how they're stepping in, how is that working for each school as far as the bullying issues?
We can break that down for you and get it to you by the end of the day tomorrow. Again, those advocates are in place for families to reach out to as often as they need to, but we'll get the data broken up in terms of how many cases they've dealt with in this first 9 weeks.
Okay.
Mrs. Thurman?
Yes, I was contacted by a couple of, actually they're retired principals now, but one of the concerns they always had, they said, was that some people got a little lax in the schoolhouse, like making sure that doors were not completely shut. And he said that we really needed to hone in, the teachers never let your guard down, because a lot of times he would go around and check the doors and the doors wouldn't be completely shut, or when they would have a drill, some of the teachers, if they were doing other work, they wouldn't really participate that much in the drill. They would think, there's no kids in the building, so we're not going to worry. But he said that those are things that he would really like to see more, that they realized they never could afford to let their guard down, and to be sure that those outside doors were completely shut, because he said he found that in his school, And so I just thought I would relay that on to you. Thanks.
All right, Mrs. Jones.
Dr. Sharp, you talked about, you shared with us the information about the officers, school safety officers and school resource deputies and their training this summer. In light of some recent experiences that we've had, I've really been toiling with this whole piece of ongoing training for our officers and assessment of their emotional intelligence and ability to self-regulate and what that looks like. And so I would like to ask, in the conversations that we have with the Sheriff's Department, is that something that's being assessed before their deputies are being placed in our buildings? Because there's been a lot of conversation about the fear of our schools becoming dumping grounds for officers that don't do well in other settings. And I am not in support of that. And I'm not saying that we do that. I'm not saying that they do that. But I'm just saying community perception is everything. And in lieu of certain situations and what has been discovered, we don't want that to be the case. I find value in student resource officers when they're doing, I'm going to have to adjust to this deputy thing, but when they're doing what I feel and what I've always understood them to do and what they've done since I was in school from 94 up. And so I think there is value there when they're not in the mindset of policing our students, but actually teaching them that they're parts of their community that are there to protect and serve them and so forth and so on. But I'm really concerned about that piece of training and making sure that when they're coming into the buildings for this certain position, that they understand what that role looks like in deference to what they would normally do on the streets.
We've had really positive conversations with the sheriff's office, and I know Scott's been working with their attorney on a document that will address some of these concerns. Basically, I kind of break it up into three categories. It's a kind of a value statement from both of us, and then it's kind of a breakdown of responsibilities, and then finally what the action steps. And I think that's what you're speaking to, Ms. Jones. I would expect in the next probably 2 weeks that should be ready, and we'll make sure that obviously we have community conversations about that, but also make sure that we get it to you and get it out to the public as well. Our thoughts, and I believe the sheriff's, I don't want to speak for him, but in the conversations that we've had with him, feel the same way in terms of increased training, but also looking at best fit, not just for SRDs, but even for our SSO. What is the best fit for that SSO? I mean, to Ms. Black's point, Victor Talavero is one of our SSOs here tonight who is extremely talented and also happens to be bilingual. So, you know, we need to use him in a place that, you know, kids can look up and see somebody who looks like them and can speak like them, and make sure that we're using his talents in the best way possible.
Thank you.
That's great. Are there any more comments or questions for Dr. Sharp? No? Thank you so much. Greatly appreciate the presentation, and by far this is one of our most important topics, so thank you. Okay, next we're going to have a discussion on board policy 6.201, and you actually have that policy in front of you. Mrs. Thurman and I were actually talking earlier in the week, and the idea of having of going over this policy came up, and so Dr. Robertson was going to maybe kind of kick off that conversation and really talk about maybe looking at this policy and maybe making some adjustments. I think is the spirit of this conversation.
I think when Ms. Thurman brought this to my attention, I obviously went and read it, and there were some things that we need just to change in it from a language standpoint. My take on this policy, and I think what we're trying to get to is, you know, we know that we have to provide more options for students. This one specifically talks about 18-year-old students, and when you hit that threshold, what those options are. But in my conversation with Ms. Thurman, she, and I don't want to speak for you, but I'll just kind of, from my perspective, it's showing parents, like at 18, here are the options, right? And the expectation of attendance and behavior and all that stuff. To me, the bigger point is even before a kid gets to 18, we have got to do a better job in Hamilton County of providing options for students. Going to school from 8 to 3 in a school that is what I would say a comprehensive high school does not work for every kid. And so we've got to be more creative about what those options look like, and we've got to communicate those better. For example, in this policy, it mentions the adult high school. The adult high school is not an option anymore, but we do have Grad Success, and Grad Success is an online program where maybe an undercredited student can go and accelerate credits. So it's really positive experience for a kid that's maybe 16 and a half, 17, that's got 12 credits and can accelerate to catch back up and graduate. We need to have more things like Success Academies. A number of our schools have Success Academies where students that maybe need to go to work at 1 o'clock can come to school and go from 7 to 12 and then leave and go to work, or the opposite may be true. Maybe they need to take care of a family member in the morning and then go to school from 2 to 6. What we struggle with, and it was one of my biggest frustrations as a principal, is just the funding to make that happen. And it wouldn't take that much money. I mean, we need to think about offering alternative options like Success Academies. We need to think about offering, Saturday academies, or like we called them in the day, Saturday schools, right? Offering, stipends to teachers to operate after school detentions. But to me, I understand this policy is not necessarily about that, but we can't wait till a student gets to 18 to then try to figure out, like, how do we help you graduate? We need to be working with students the minute they come into high school. I always said, if a student doesn't pass English 9 and Algebra 1 their freshman year, if you don't have a plan right away, 90% of them aren't going to graduate. And I'm making that stat up.
Sure.
But that's a key metric as a high school principal. First 9 weeks, if you're failing English 9 and you're failing Algebra 1, we got to have a plan right then to get it going. But schools need funding to make that happen. Ms. Sermon, I would defer to you.
Oh, yeah, well, that was part of the, I just wanted to be sure that everyone know the options.
Yeah.
That parents know the options going into high school. This needs to be laid out for parents. These are your options. If your child has this many credits and they're not on track to graduate, these are their options. Instead of having 18-year-olds who are freshmen and things like that. I mean, we can no longer afford to continue to do that because it just causes lots of issues in our schools. So those are just things I just wanted to look at. I just wanted to know what all the options were because, like I say, when you have what are considered to be adults in school and they don't behave and stuff, sometimes they just disrupt the classroom and disrupt the school in lots of cases. And the other students that are there to learn are not able to do that. You're robbing them of their educational experience. So I just think we need to have some kind of a chart, some kind of a handout at the beginning of high school to let parents know these are your child's options, whatever those options are. And I don't know what this board can do about, I don't have a problem with Saturday school. I don't know how much money you're talking about. Maybe we can get it from some other program maybe that we're still not using because I know at one time we had lots of other different programs I know we're not doing anymore. I don't have a problem with Saturday school at all. For different reasons. If kid's not able to do the work during the week whether it's because of behavior or whatever, we need to just figure out what our options are going to be, and this board needs to do that. But I just thought it was very important that the teachers know, that the principals know, the parents know, and the students know what their options are, that you're not going to be allowed to disrupt the school year. If you are not on track to graduate and you're 18 years old, you have to have a plan of where you're going to go and not just show up at school every day to cause problems or whatever the issue is. But
we can take it on as a charge to maybe present something in November that lays out what options, if it's pleasure of the board, we could put some figures together, see what options even start implementing in January. and we could look at just where we are from budget standpoint of how we might fund those. Again, this is a conversation that we've been having for several months, and it's just right now it's a gap in the system of we've got to do a better job of again, not waiting till a student is 3 years in. We've got to have some interventions in 9th grade and have some funding for those interventions. So we'll take it on and bring something back in November that lists out what those options might look like and put some dollar amounts to them.
Up until you get that for the options, what options, yeah, I just want the principals, we already have this policy in place for students who are in the school who are discipline problems. We don't have to wait on that.
No, I mean, I look at this as two different
right, exactly.
multiple
That's what I'm saying.
conversations. I mean, from a student achievement and success standpoint, we have, again, a number of schools that have success academies. We do have the graduation success program. Last resort, we can get students in touch with the HCS program, or what the old GED program would have been. That is not ideal, but that's an option. Right now, from a discipline standpoint, our middle and high schools have ISS, which is a good option. A number of them are using title funds or other grant sources to operate what they call an evening school, but it's not a full-fledged evening school. It's like a 2 to 3 hour after school program. And then really from there it goes to Washington Alternative, which, so I mean, you can see where that gap is when you go from ISS to a limited evening school all the way to Washington Alternative. There are obviously places where we can fill in better options.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Perez?
So just quickly, two things that I think about when we talk about the 18-year-olds that aren't happening right now will happen in a few years. A lot of parents held their kids back in 2021 to not enter school in kindergarten, so they'll be older. And with this 3rd grade retention law, we may have kids that, even on top of that, are held back. So we're foreseeing students that might be 19 or 20 graduating 6, 7, whatever that would be, 10 years down the road. I don't know my math. But anyway, so this is a good time to be looking at alternatives.
Great. Are there any more comments on this topic? Or any questions? Okay, so we'll revisit this in November, it sounds like, and we'll have this on the agenda as maybe a presentation. Is that right? Okay, good deal. Okay, well, we are doing really well on time. So we are going to move into our agenda, our discussion of the board meeting agenda. And this is our first time doing it in this format. So we're going to go through the agenda together, and I'm really just saying this for new board members. We're going to go through the agenda together, and if you've got items that you want to have a discussion on, which that maybe you would have pulled from the voting agenda, just light up, click your button, and I will call on you, okay? So first we're going to start out with roll call, of course, and then we will have our election of our vice chair tonight. We'll have the approval of the agenda, and I do want to note that there will be an amendment on the agenda for board matter B. We can discuss that more as we get through the agenda. We'll have our pledge of the flag and meditation from Ms. Fanny Moore, principal of CSAS Lower School. We'll have our exemplars of excellence. We'll give our board member disclaimer statement, and then we'll go through the consent agenda. Does anyone have something that they want to pull or discuss on the consent agenda? Mr. Connor?
Thank you. I want to discuss under Section 8, letter D, number 3, and then A, labeled federal grants, state grants, and self-funded programs.
Great. Go ahead and ask your questions about that, if you're ready.
All right. So when I pull it up, this is specifically board policy, federal grants. So this is directly the $2 million coming to us in a source of funds to fund the elective program for Bible study as literacy. Now, I know that there has been a few different instances in our recent past regarding this and slight misdoings of the class in general. First of it not being gained as literacy. Second, some people have brought up different ways that it doesn't, it's more of an indoctrination instead of what it's meant to be. So I understand the intention of the program, and I appreciate the generosity of the folks to spend the money. Obviously, they're helping to give people that want a class. But until we can provide and guarantee options for all of our students of different faith backgrounds, I cannot in good faith or conscience vote to approve this. Now, I have done my due diligence today. I've talked to Dr. Robertson and found out a few more details about it, but not clear as mud. So I want to make sure that I am involved in the process and see what happens through the course of this year. I know that we already have the teachers in place. I know that we have already got the program set up, and I know that people have already committed to being a part of them. So it's not something that I'm saying today that we need to dissolve, but it's definitely something that we as a board need to make sure it is being implemented correctly, not getting us into any sticky situations, and something that I'm going to pull so that I can abstain from voting from. But promise the board and promise District 6 in Hamilton County that I'm going to be looking into it to make sure that it's run correctly.
You want to make some comments? Yeah.
Yeah, and just to add on to conversation I had with Mr. Connor, I thought he had a really good point this afternoon when we spoke about what we've talked about is getting Bible in the school's curriculum on a regular review like we do any other course. And we're planning to include members of different faith backgrounds, and Mr. Connor volunteered to also serve on that committee, which I think it's a really good idea to have someone there. So I put Mr. Connor and Blake Freeman in contact today to make sure that happens, and then to meet going forward so that he can keep you guys up to date, and he can be the one that presses us a little bit on this.
To add one last thing to that, so the follow-up, if anyone's asking, this is a springtime thing is when we're talking about. So I will make sure that I can come back and report to the board and say what we've gone over, and that we have included those faith leaders and people that want to be involved in it. So.
Okay. We're going to hold you to it. Okay. Okay, Mr. Garone?
I had given you a list
Yes.
of the items that I'd wanted.
Yes. Do you want me to read? Do you want to pull? You want to list them out directly, or do you want me to list them?
No, you can list.
Okay. Mr. Garland wants to, he's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. He's got 5 items. So first, let's talk about 1.806. Oh, I'm sorry. And these are, yeah, I'm sorry. These are policies. So under second and final read. Okay. Do you want to address 1.806 advertising and distribution of materials in the schools, Mr. Groen?
Certainly. Thank you very much. I just have some clarification questions
Okay.
for the board. It says, no part of the school system, including the facilities, the name, the staff, the students shall be used for promoting, advertising, or promoting the interest of any commercial, political, or non-school agency or organization except that. And then it lists all of these. So what do we see as not supporting education that might be advertised by anyone in the school? So that, what does that include? Does that include any A buttons that are coming out, or of course no political at all, or a political party? So I'm just wondering, what does the board see as promoting the interest of what? And
Mr. Bennett, is this something that you want to address? I'm not clear on who actually wrote this policy.
This policy was actually developed some time ago by TSBA.
Okay.
We've tweaked it over the years, so it probably doesn't bear a whole lot of resemblance to what TSBA originally did. That primary aim of this policy is to avoid little Hatch Act. Where I sit now, I can't see you all. I can either not see this end of the board or the superintendent. So I think y'all are probably familiar with the Little Hatch Act and its prohibition against the use of schools, well, really any local government asset in support of a political campaign or a political view. And of course, this doesn't limit itself to political interests. But the genesis of this policy was designed to keep someone from using the school system's resources for an endorsement. It is not intended to go so far as to stifle what would be individual speech. So, for instance, during, and let's assume that dress codes are basically, you need appearance. Let's not go into any loose detail. If a child showed up and he was wearing a shirt that had a political candidate on it or a political slogan on it, this policy could not be read to stifle First Amendment free speech. That's not what this is intended to do. This is to keep someone from using school resources, school email accounts, that's been a concern in years gone by, school mailing lists, things like that in support of a political campaign. Part of TSBA's model policy also takes it a step further, and you see this language in line 2. There's a general prohibition against using school resources in support of a commercial interest. In other words, private enterprise is great, but we shouldn't use school grounds to subsidize a commercial interest. As you get further into this, we could probably pick and ask further questions. So much of the time, this is really read in conjunction with the Little Hatch Act. And as you pointed out, we're in that political season. And I suspect in the next several weeks, the administration is going to get lots of questions about this campaign sign or a political candidate wanting to have his picture made on the front steps of a particular school, or can he be seen with a certain number of kids, et cetera. So that's the genesis, Madam Chair. Again, over time, we've kind of tweaked it to respond to some specific questions that have come up over the years. But in generally, this is a Little Hatch Act issue.
Yeah, let me be a little bit more specific
Sure.
for you, Mr. Bennett. What about the wearing of anything that, let's just say by staff in a school that might have a QR code that the student could copy and go to some site which wouldn't be authorized necessarily by the school?
So like a poster, like,
A
for
poster or a
fundraiser
button or that has a QR code that might, who knows where this QR code is going to take this student. And the reason I ask is because by somebody having a poster, by wearing a button, that could mean that the student could easily imply, or a parent could imply, that that's being endorsed by the school.
So that's a really context-specific question. And so when you're looking at endorsement issues, it's context, context, context. I'm going to come back to your question, but I'm going to give you an easier example. Let's suppose you have a poster up on a teacher's wall. Let's say it's math class. And the teacher has up on the wall a poster endorsing a a particular candidate for president. Well, that's obviously political speech. It's obviously not tied to anything related to the curriculum. It would be a violation of this particular policy. Change the facts just a little bit. Let's say that instead it's a history class and there's a poster up of Reagan Bush, 84, and maybe some other campaign materials. And so is that an endorsement of a particular party or a particular president at a particular time in American history, or is it a historical presentation? Context there matters. So whereas one poster would be impermissible, another one might be okay. To your specific question, I'm going to be honest and say I had to catch up with you for a second about QR code. But I know what you're talking about. I think what you're saying is if a teacher walks in and is wearing a shirt with the QR code and a kid says, well, that looks interesting, and then does this, and it takes someone to a website, if it's a political endorsement, then that might be problematic. But here's the other question. Some political speech might still be protected. So let's say, as a for instance, that there's a shirt that says Black Lives Matter. Let's take something that's and by the way, I apologize if you asked me what time it was and I'm accidentally telling you how to build a clock. I apologize. But what we have to look at in the context is, what is the message being conveyed? Does the recipient understand that message? And is there a context in which that message is acceptable? And you look at that through the lens of what other decisions have you made that are comparable. So it's an intensely fact-specific question.
Okay. There is an organization nationwide that now distributes certain pins that would take a student to a website that some people in this room would consider pornographic. So and that's just a for instance, and I can share with you, we can talk about this in depth farther, but I've already seen one of these worn by a teacher in one of our schools. To me, that's unacceptable. So I want to know how this document here pertains to that.
I would say this document doesn't. I would say that the code of acceptable conduct would pertain to that. And in that scenario, if what you're describing is a kid takes scans a QR code and it takes the child to a pornographic site, we have other problems. We don't even need to worry about this policy. So
I did say that some would consider to be pornographic, maybe not all.
Well, let's just assume, based upon community standards, that it would be. We don't even get to this policy because what we're worried about there is unprofessional conduct. So on this point at least, by all means, let's talk about this after the meeting, and maybe we need to loop in the administration and explore this, because I am aware enough of current technology to recognize that there are a lot of ways that you can sneak stuff in through QR codes. So
Right.
if this is a current trend, I think we need to be prepared for that.
Okay, well, that was, on that
Great.
particular question, that was
Okay,
what I wanted to speak about.
great. Okay, the next policy was 3.200 under first reading. It is buildings and grounds.
I'm wondering why what's listed in red on line 14 was added. It seems to be putting more burden on the executive committee of the board, when this, to me, seems just like a COO could just take care of this without having to check another bureaucratic box.
Okay. Does Shannon want to speak to that?
I mean,
Or you
I
can?
can.
Okay,
I
great.
think to the point, if you guys choose to do that, it makes sense. All this is saying is, we've got an old lawnmower sitting there. We're gonna get rid of it. You and I have to sign it, or I can just sign it.
Well, but that was,
I think
well,
I think the reason.
why should we change it when the COO would just sign off on it?
I mean, I think it was probably done. I'm not quite sure, but just from standpoint of some oversight from the board because it is.
It is a board. It is
equipment.
technically an asset of the board.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know this says 12/16/04, but
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think it's, I mean, it is antiquated in some sense, but I think it's because the property belongs to the board is the governing body for the district. So technically we own it, Justin doesn't. So when he signs and gives it away, he's giving away something that belongs to us. It's antiquated, but I mean, that's the theory in it.
Is it 3,200?
It's kind of like him buying a piece of property and we don't approve it. I mean, he doesn't have the right to do that without us approving it. I mean, you could, but you're going to have to pay the mortgage on it, but I'm just.
it's just that anyone who works under the superintendent operates under certain parameters, and he is given them that authority. So it's just something else for our superintendent to have to do when it seems like it's automatically just done by the COO.
So if I may, the answer to that question is that there's a statute that says that the executive committee of the board has to approve what is obsolete and determine the proper disposal. So that's statutory. Now, as a practical matter, the way it really will work, I assume, is that finance or operations will declare something obsolete and will make a recommendation. Because honestly, if you're looking at an old lawnmower, it might not be worth selling. It might not be worth auctioning off. You might just have to junk it. So the administration does compile that list, but it goes through the executive committee, where really all you're doing is, and it's supposed to come to the board as part of the executive committee's report to the board so that there is an official record of property disposal. The executive committee isn't going to really sit down and go through these particular items. If you look at the statute, technically every item in the school system is purchased by the executive committee of the board, but it says that the board shall purchase every item through the executive committee. I'm fairly confident that these two don't sit down and decide how much milk they're going to buy for Bestie Shepherd this week. That is pushed down to people, but it's done under their authority, so it's delegated. The reason that I had recommended we insert this is to bring us in compliance with the express language of the statute, and all this requires is that there be a paper trail going to the board that this board signs off on.
Yeah.
That nobody looks at.
But there is a.
You can if you want to.
But it's part of asset management.
Yeah.
Yes.
And maybe no one looks at it, but here's the thing: you would be surprised the number of times that Sherry and I have to go back and look through board minutes from 10 years ago to find something.
But it also becomes public record, so the public.
Yeah.
There you go. There you go.
Okay.
Yeah, I do just want to point out, though, that because that policy isn't a first read, I mean, if you desire to put it up for a vote to change, we can certainly do that. So I just want to point that out. Okay, so the next one was 3.201, which is the safety policy, which is also a first read.
We already have legislation in place for a principal making sure of safety within the schools. For those who don't have a copy of this, the principal and any other appropriate school official is authorized to ban any person from the campus of any or all schools where, in the judgment of the principal or other school official, doing so is necessary to maintain an orderly, secure environment for students and employees and/or their property. My question on this would be, we already know that we have discipline issues in our schools, and we have some principals at some schools being more strict and some principals at other schools. So I have a problem with adding something where you a principal arbitrarily bans someone in their opinion, where another principal would just ask the person per the law to leave the campus. And they have to appear, they have to go through all this security as Dr. Sharp talked about anyway. So I'm having a problem with, number one, banning someone from any and all facilities, and how arbitrary this can be. And I think it's unnecessary based upon the statutes that actually support this.
I would make a recommendation maybe to address the concerns, and again, policy is the will of the board, it's not the will of the administration, but I would make a recommendation that you put a level of supervision where maybe if a principal requests that somebody be banned from a campus, that it gets reviewed by the chief operations officer or community superintendent for approval, and then you could even maybe put a level of appeal to the superintendent from there.
And then how would an individual who might be banned, what is their recourse?
That's what I'm saying, is if a principal decides to ban an individual from the campus, where it works currently under procedures, they do it in written form. And just like suspension of 10 or more days, we could say, banned, if you would like to appeal this decision, contact Chief Operations Office. At this point, Robert Sharp. Robert could hear an appeal, and then, if it wants to go even further, they can go to the superintendent. I hear what you're saying about there probably could be a level of like recourse on the parent's part. Unofficially, that always happens anyway. I mean, if a parent gets banned from a campus, I promise you they're calling us.
Mr. Perez has comments. Or you
No,
did? I'm sorry. Okay. All
But
right.
again, first read, y'all can make that change.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, I mean, we could pull that and, vote to have it amended or changed.
Yes.
So, okay. All right, next one is 3.206, which is community use of school.
Yes, we have a community use of school that has to be approved by each individual principal if a member or group in the community wants to have some event at a school, and it also has to be approved by the Office of Risk Management. Why would we put in another layer of bureaucracy to where it has to be also approved by a community superintendent? Where taxpayers pay for these properties through their tax dollars over decades, and they may want to use the facility and it may be approved, but why are we adding another bureaucratic level?
Since I'm still at the table, I don't mind answering that one. I was thinking about taking a seat over there a minute ago. Understand your question. That's been the practice for a good number of years now. And what we find where that helps us is at the district, the community superintendent is aware of what's going on, who's in the building, when they're in the building. Oftentimes, many of these facilities request usage agreements are for events that occur after school hours, maybe even on the weekend. Things can happen, need for a support, facility support, issue with a backed up, toilet, or, the lights aren't on, or something like that. So that just allows district personnel to keep track of who's in our buildings, when they're in our buildings, and to be able to respond with support if needed. Well,
Wouldn't the community superintendent be informed of this and not necessarily have to also approve it?
Well, this is the process where they become informed. Traditionally, we've used that as an approval process, as a final signature. It goes back to the principal. I don't know the history of that practice. I inherited it. That's what I did as a principal. We've been doing that for a number of years. This just puts it into the policy.
Just, I would like to say, just for some of the newer, some of
Yeah.
my newer board peers, that one thing that I've always tried to do since we've had learning community superintendents, and even when we had executive cabinet, before that, and then, of course, we went to the community superintendents, is to build relationships with your community superintendents. Because oftentimes when things happen after hours or on the weekends or not during school hours or even during school hours, when the call comes in to you, they're calling you about it, right? Well, you might not know it. I don't know everything that happens at Brainerd High School. I do not. I don't know everything that happens at East Ridge High School or East Brainerd Elementary. But what I do know is I can call Dr. Vance, who was the learning community superintendent for Missionary Ridge. I used to could call Dr. Stewart till she promoted, but now I can call Dr. Lawless Mitchell and ask her, hey, I got a call from this mom, blah, 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 blah. Or even the principal. I mean, it just kind of helps to build your relationships. And if you're learning, what I found is, oftentimes because Justin is who we're supposed to call, right? But I mean, he's a very busy man. So if I can build relationships with the other people that are there in his support team, then I actually can troubleshoot at that level before it even makes it to him. But by building those relationships with your learning community superintendent, they would know if something was going on in their building. They would know maybe what happened if it became a bad situation, but they're able to provide you some education on that. So I'm not speaking necessarily to this policy per se, but I do know that typically when you hit that learning community superintendent, they pretty much are already aware of what's going on because they've talked to the principal or they've talked to the coach or they've talked to whomever who was holding that event, and they know, and they're able to help you support out to your community, and it just makes it easier in the long run to me across the whole district. So like if I get a call about something in your district, of course I'm gonna refer them to you, but then I also can say, if you don't get what you need here, and I would expect you to do the same thing to me, you can call Dr. Stewart, or you can call Dr. Harper, or you can call whoever, and they're able to troubleshoot that for you and assist you with that. And I personally have found that principals, and Mr. King can speak to this, but principals respect that too, that you're able to build that relationship at that level and not necessarily run and tell on them for something that they could have addressed.
I'm just saying that the community superintendent is going to be informed. I just don't know why they also have to approve it. So.
Yeah. I mean, again, it's a first read policy. If
Yep.
it's the will of the board to make a change for next month before it gets voted on,
Right.
that will of the board.
Mr. Connor?
So I would like to harp exactly what Chris has said and agree. And I also would say, you know, when I was in restaurants, you can't expect what you don't inspect. And so when you ask somebody to sign off on it, you're saying that they have actually looked at it and they've actually touched it and they agree with it. So therefore, they know about it, and they can then, my community superintendent is awesome, and I know that I will know if there's a situation where there's something that maybe people are going to draw attention to, something that as their board member, I don't want to be blindsided by somebody saying, hey, the underwater basket weavers are coming today, and you know, I want to know that they're going to be there in order to address it with the community. So I think another level of support is wonderful, as it's already in their job description, as we've just talked about.
Okay.
Any more comments on that one from anyone? All right. And then we've got policy 1.404, which is a final read, and that is appearances before the board. Mr. Groen?
Now, there was, I believe in August, the board made some changes to who can speak before the board and who is able to speak about be it books or curriculum or whatever at the school level. And that being that you can only, you have to have a student in the system to be able to complain or lodge a complaint at the school level. What we have before us in 1.404, the last sentence of the first paragraph starting at the end of line 4, the board encourages individuals with complaints or concerns to speak with the appropriate employee or administrator, then first addressing the board. Isn't that in direct conflict with what the board passed in August, I believe?
No.
I don't believe so.
No.
Tell us more about the conflict that you see.
Well, taxpayers, individuals who live in the community around a school, this says the board is encouraging those individuals to speak, to go to the school and speak to an administrator there.
I gotcha.
Whereas the new policy passed by the previous board says that unless you have a student in the district or in that school, you cannot lodge any complaint. So either this needs to be struck or some sort of change needs to be made so that there's no conflict,
Yeah.
where there's no misunderstanding of what's allowed.
Do you have that policy in front of you?
Well, I have the 1401 up. I don't think that there's necessarily a conflict because it says the board encourages individuals with complaints or concerns. So it's a recognition that this board is in some sense a legislative body. It doesn't say that, like, if you have a complaint with Dr. Robertson, it doesn't say we're not going to hear a complaint about Dr. Robertson until you go and talk with Dr. Robertson. The board obviously has the authority to hear whatever business relates to the school system. That's also sort of a First Amendment issue. This is just a recognition that if you want to get a problem solved quickly, it's usually better to talk to the person who can actually address it. Now, to the point about the I'm sorry, I keep wanting to say book club. The book review policy, with regard to the book review policy, there, if you want to file a complaint, and if you want to go through that process where where the administration impanels a committee and really assesses the merit of a book, and then makes a recommendation about whether the book stays or goes, there you've got to follow that policy, and you've got to have some dog in the fight, if you will. You've got to either be an employee of the school or you have to have a child who's in the school. That doesn't mean that someone couldn't come before this board and say broadly, I'm really concerned about the entire ELA curriculum this school board's adopted. I think that this entire curriculum is bad, and here's why. So I don't read these two policies together to say that the door is shut on someone who wants to exercise the opportunity to speak before this board and say, hey, I don't have any kids in the Hamilton County schools, but I'm very concerned about this. So I hear what you're saying. I don't see that there's a conflict. At the end of the day, of course, it's up to this board to determine if there's a conflict. I think encouraging people to resolve an issue is good business. So as a for instance, let's say I'm a parent and I have some concerns about the ELA curriculum. I think that some of the books are not age appropriate. But I don't have a child at Nolan Elementary. That doesn't keep me from going and finding out who the director of curriculum is, and sitting down and talking with the director of curriculum and asking, help me understand why the system is using this curriculum as opposed to that curriculum. In that scenario, that policy is in perfect conformity. The board is encouraging someone to talk to somebody who can answer the questions. And then after I've spoken to the representative of the administration, who's the curriculum specialist, I can then come and address the board and say, members of the board, Madam Chair, I've spoken to the director of curriculum and I'm still unhappy. Here's what I think you need to be aware of. So reading these two policies in together, I think there's a way to harmonize them.
Well, let me give you a for instance. Grandparents and non-custodial parents who their child is in one of our elementary schools, and they do object to some of the ELA curriculum. Yet, based upon what was passed in August, their only recourse is to come before this board.
Or go to Well, and as an aside, there's nothing that prevents that non-custodial parent or the grandparent from talking to the principal and saying, I have a problem. It's just not going to trigger the detailed book review process that we've spelled out.
I understand.
There's also nothing that would preclude that non-custodial parent or a grandparent from approaching Dr. Robertson and saying, Dr. Robertson, I have a problem with this. Have you talked to the principal? No, I haven't, because I'm a non-custodial parent. I'm coming to you because I feel like this is my best recourse. Or if someone were to approach, the way that y'all are doing appearances before the board now, if someone were to appear before the board and say, ladies and gentlemen of the board, Madam Chair, Mr. Superintendent, I'm here to address this because I can't take advantage of this policy. That's where the board can say at the end of a public comment, Dr. Robertson, can you look into this? So I don't read these two policies as denying a voice to folks. There's a world in which I think this board could do that, but I don't think this board wants to do that.
I want the board to be careful about the idea that we have lots of taxpayers in this county. And to limit those who have more access to lodge complaints about curriculum or other things going on in our schools to only those who have students in the system, I have a real problem with that in terms of, in some ways, it can be read as we're going to tax you, but you have no position to complain about what we do with your tax dollars.
And I understand that concern, and I see it from the constitutional perspective. If someone has a complaint, then we don't want to close our ears to someone because they might not have standing to initiate a book review complaint, right? That doesn't mean they don't have a voice to come before this board, or by the same token, to approach your superintendent and say, Mr. Superintendent, I've got a concern about this. That doesn't mean that it triggers the book review process, the very detailed book review process that we have, but they still have a voice. So I hear what you're saying. I would look at this as being more than just a taxpayer issue. I look at this as a First Amendment advocacy issue. So I think we're saying the same thing. I hope we're saying the same thing. My advice is always going to be, if someone wants to approach the board and say, I have a problem with this curriculum, I think that it's good business for this board to say, have you talked to the curriculum people? I think that's good. I think that's good problem management. But if they don't get the result that they want, then they can always come to that podium and address their concerns to this body.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
We've got a couple other, let me get Mrs. Robinson over here and then Mr. Perez. I do think this would be a healthy conversation for the policy committee, which Mr. Wingate is heading up for us. So I encourage you to host a policy committee meeting and make this top of the agenda. Go ahead.
Well, I'm looking at the revision for the appearance before the board, and it says any resident of Hamilton County. And I hope that the board here will always agree that any resident is able to speak before the board. We live in a community, and the students are our leaders of the future. Their decisions will affect us. So we want to know what the concerns are. And I don't see where it states that you only have a voice if you have children. Will you point that out, Larry?
I think what he was referring to was to get a book taken out of the library, you had to have a student and you had to have a specific.
But we're not voting on that.
But I know, but I think that's the policy.
That was the concern. That was a big concern.
I think that's
But
what
we're not
he's
voting
trying
on
to.
that policy.
Yeah, we're not.
Curriculum. I think those are two different.
They are.
Yeah.
They
Am I
are.
right?
Yeah.
Okay, well, I just
Well,
wanted to let it be.
Yeah.
I want to thank the board. I want to thank
Yeah.
the chair and the board for, indulging me through all of
Absolutely.
this. I'm just wanting to make sense of everything.
Absolutely. I do
Thank
think
you.
this is definitely a good conversation for policy committee as well. You don't have a comment? Okay, thank you guys so much. So we got through our consent agenda. Next we'll move into board matters. Does anyone have a question about, well, first let me say, item B has been amended, and you have a purchase and sell agreement in front of you for the Cigna property. Let's go ahead and review that, if you don't mind, Dr. Sharp.
Yes, so since we last brought this, this piece to the board, there's been some changes. As the sale has progressed, there's been some additional survey work done, and which ended up being some minor modifications to the actual property. It doesn't impact the overall plan at all. The survey does move into some trail areas that we originally thought we were getting. So there is a bit of lost space there, but the seller has agreed to go in and construct those, get those trails built. We've negotiated a plan there. They've actually lowered the price. How often does that happen?
You saved us some money.
Yeah, we're saving a little money.
Not y'all, remember
County Commission, right, yeah. So how often have you taken something to the county commission and said, hey, it's less than what we thought it was?
And they're depositing it at our account afterwards? Is that-
No.
So the purchase price has been reduced to $7,925,000 from $8 million. In addition, they're going to provide us reimbursement for the installation of a playground at the site for up to $250,000.
Oh, that's great.
So that does save you.
Yeah, it sure does.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's us, yes.
Great.
So that's it. Everything else is the same.
Okay. Mrs. Thurman?
Okay, as soon as that's over with, talking about this, I know that we're buying this building to relieve the overcrowding at East Brainerd, correct? This is the
Not
reason-
necessarily specifically, it's more about that East Brainerd Road corridor. You go from Abson, Westview to East Brainerd, plenty of kids there, and as things continue to build.
Yeah.
I mean, this is probably a minimum a year and a half away from ever having.
I just want
a
everybody
kid
to
in
understand
it.
what we're talking about.
Yeah.
And while we're talking about this, another thing I spoke with you about earlier that I want to get on the agenda, Tiffany, for maybe next month or so, we need to, I know we're going to have to do some rezoning out in the, and you newcomers don't understand what a problem this is. And everybody, all the old people go, yeah, okay. But we're going to have to do some rezoning for Howard and East Ridge. And that's something that I think we need to put on the agenda to go ahead and start that discussion, because that will probably have to happen, the first of next year?
Yeah.
Probably.
Could I make a recommendation? Could we have, put that on a facilities committee discussion? And
Okay.
we can work on some options, and then that way it opens it up to the community to come to that meeting and participate. And then, once we get to a place where we are, we could put it on a regular agenda.
Okay.
We're gonna have to go have community meetings and do all that.
Yeah, well, that's what I say. It's something we need to start the discussion about, because there's going to have to be some movement of students, and I don't like anybody being blindsided. I want people to know what all their options are. So if we can go ahead and get that conversation started, that would be great. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Smith?
Dr. Robertson, what might be good, just a thought, because I know you guys certainly have already been talking about this, but maybe to, at least from a preliminary standpoint, to kind of share some of the conversations you've already had, maybe bring that to our board retreat, which might be a good place for us to start those I mean, it's November. It's going to be the next school year in a day or two. It's going to be that fast. So I would recommend, because I would like to think, and I believe you have, your staff has already had some of those discussions already.
I think that's an excellent idea.
We can definitely look at adding that to the agenda, Mr. Smith. Thank you. Okay, Mr. Grohl?
I apologize for this. Dr. Sharp, I uncovered some of my notes that I wanted to ask you a question on school safety. It's come to my attention that substitutes are not given a key to their room, and if we have a lockdown situation and a sub is unable to lock their door, isn't that a safety problem?
Actually, can I interrupt for a moment? I'd like to finish out this portion of the agenda, and then if we can circle back to that at the end, that would be, if you don't mind, Mr. Grom.
I don't mind.
Thank you so much. If there's no more questions about the Cigna building purchase, let's go back up to Board Matters Item A, lease agreements between Hamilton County Board of Education and City of Chattanooga for operation of Head Start programs. Are there any comments or questions on that item? Okay. All right, and then skipping down to item C, we have the PECA Special Question Committee. Is there any discussion around that item? Oh, I'm sorry, and you will see the PECA, the letter or the memo in front of you. Should look like this with yellow highlights. Oh, I'm the only person that has it. Never mind. I'm the only one. I know. So, well, it is in your electronic files. Yes, you do. Okay, is there any discussion on that item? Okay, if not, then then that ends our agenda work session. You do. Okay. Mrs. Jones.
Under Chief Financial Officer, the ESSER 3 focus area, this is more so a question for Dr. Robertson and his team, not necessarily Mary Ellen, but under the ESSER 3 focus areas, the item program and the estimated cost. Under Learning Acceleration, there's 5 truancy specialists for FY23. Where are those going?
They're not, I mean, specific to, like those 5 aren't specifically saying going there. I mean, basically the truancy officers we have, off the top of my head, I want to say that there are 2 at Brainerd, 2 at Howard, and then the other ones are spread out split between schools. And so every school has access to at least some part of a truancy officer.
Okay, and then also under Learning Acceleration, it talks about a consultant to support out of school time, early literacy, and post-secondary pipeline work. My question is, this consultant and the investment we're making in them, what is the expected return on that investment?
Let us get back to you on that, Ms. Jones.
Okay, I have another one. Under learning loss, the after-school tutoring and summer reach through June 2024. My question is, also the interventionists and tutors to support this learning loss. So my question is kind of the where, how, and who will this affect, i.e. in the population? And I want to explain that my question is not, I know when we tier students, we tier them 1, 2, and 3, right? And it normally looks like this, like a pyramid. But oftentimes we can, in certain schools, it's really inverted, right? And so what happens to those students that are scoring proficient, but could be possibly at the cusp of becoming approaching? So like your tier 1s that could be headed toward tier 2, or your tier 2s that may score proficient but still are having some deficits. And I know when they tier them, like they tier them for a specific thing, either numeracy or literacy. But sometimes it's kind of both. But overall, my question is this going to affect those students that may be in that cusp that necessarily don't meet the parameters for, what is the nickname for the new tutoring they're giving in the school? Not reach, CAP, scope, step. I knew it was something. Those kids meet certain parameters, but there are children that are right behind them that need it just as much. So will this be addressing any of those children?
I mean, the short answer is yes. I mean, we are always trying to build the systems in our school that address the learning gaps for every single child. The law has us focused on specific kids that have specific outcomes and have requirements, but In November, we're bringing to you guys the retention policy and the broad scope of support, and you should see lots in there about how we are trying to meet the needs of kids, particularly pushing to those younger grades for all of the kids, not
Okay.
just looking at those third and fourth graders that don't meet that expectation.
Okay. That's all I got.
Great. Mrs. Black?
I didn't know exactly when to bring this up because it's not necessarily attached to a policy. But the idea that was floated by the community of forming a task force specifically examining the needs and lives of our E&L students. I certainly am invested considering that 5 of the majority E&L student schools are in my district. I want their voices. My background as an organizer is nothing about me without me. And I am invested and would love to see us connect with those voices, because I don't know that most of us up here that sit behind this dais don't have a grasp of what that path looks like. And we're going to be making a lot of decisions around alternative paths, learning paths, facilities needs around this growing community, and I want to hear from them.
Yeah, I would be interested in, thank you, Mrs. Black, really appreciate that. I would be interested to know Dr. Robertson's thoughts. Has the administration considered putting a team together, a committee of sorts that would look at that? And if not yet, then perhaps that is something that members of the board and the administration can team up on?
We can. We've done a lot of work. Diego, do you mind stepping up and talking about the work that you've been doing? It doesn't necessarily align perfectly with a task force, but Diego's team's done a lot of work around this engagement.
Sure. So thank you. We've really been looking at things through the lens of ensuring that our kiddos have access to the support services within their respective zone schools. So really trying to figure out how we are ensuring that our E&L, our kiddos that need to be supported with the E&L services have those directed supports within their respective zone schools. So for the last couple of years, we've really been working strategically to make sure that we have those support services aligned, and the district has really worked to align those resources to ensure that we can open up those sites so that folks are served within their respective communities. Each year since I've been here now coming on my 4th year now in November, we have opened up sites across the district. We have in District 2 a few schools still that we have to work toward moving some of our kiddos around to ensure that they're going to be served within their respective schools. In terms of engagement with families, we have our International Welcome Center that has opened up here in October of last year. It's been actually open for about a year, where we've been able to serve within our first year about 262 families and get some input and feedback from them in terms of the types of supports that are needed within their respective schools. More recently here now, moving into this school year, we've served about 62 families there within the Welcome Center, and again, garnering feedback and input around how we can better support folks within their respective community. We continue to add district supports in terms of interpreters. Each year, this year we're onboarding some additional folks, 4 to be precise. We're at about 21 interpreters across the district. In terms of language supports, we have some support with a over-the-phone translations company that can support over 200 languages within the district. So we're really leveraging all of the resources that we have available to us to reach families, and ensuring that, at the district level, we are translating documents. We're working to provide the interpretation supports across the district, and ensuring that as we're opening up new sites, we're pairing those interpreters to be available to those respective communities.
So it seems like the interpreters are kind of like how the social workers were when I first came to the board, and less of them than doesn't equate to the students. So my question is, are you all clustering the interpreters to like feeder patterns, or like how? That's one question. And second to that, the language line phones that you're using, are they similar to like the blue phones? We used to call them blue phones in the hospital, or the cordless phones that do. Is there a language line phone in every school?
So,
and do we use those, second to that, do we use those in interaction with our families when we call them to like meetings and that sort of thing?
Thank you. So In terms of clustering folks, we have started to look at those feeder patterns and align interpreters so that we can have, so where we have representation of smaller populations of students, ensuring that we have the alignment of those interpreters to touch every school. For our schools that have higher populations requiring the language supports, we have dedicated at one FTE for that particular school because the need is so great in terms of having that service available to both students and families and staff so that they're able to communicate effectively. To your question about the language support line, it is a call-in number where we authorize folks to use a particular sequence or code, and they're able to jump on the line and utilize that particular language. So if they need to get on and talk to a family that requires support in Gujarati, right? They're going to just get on the line, dial the number, and it's going to be a third-party conversation that can be had with those folks. We facilitate that through our district lead interpreter so that she's able to connect and ensure that we're able to kind of manage and support folks with that process. So this is something that we're implementing within the district, and we've been really working hard to make sure that folks have accessibility to that language line.
Question. Okay. Have we considered, not everybody reads the language that they speak. And so sending flyers home in Spanish it's not necessarily an effective way to communicate. When we send emails from the district office or when principals send emails, have we considered attaching audio files that translates those emails into the spoken word so that it provides accessibility for more families to understand what we're trying to communicate to them?
Our schools interpreters utilize the school messenger system. So to your point, we're looking to see and ensure that folks have accessibility. So as something gets sent out, those individual schools really know and understand their populations. They're able to have their interpreter jump on and send that particular message to those folks. That's something we can explore further to ensure that, as we're, to your point, the text may not be as accessible, so having that language support or that audio file that might be attached to that is a great idea and something we can explore further.
Mrs. Jones, you were there. You're not there now. Okay. Mark, Mr. Prez, did you already ask your question?
No, I didn't.
Great.
Well, so again, thank you. I know that there's been a lot of work done. I guess I will say I am privileged to be called by some of the schools during parent-teacher conferences or other registration, especially because of the high need of interpreters at a time that there's a high volume of parents and teachers needing to be able to communicate. And so I can attest to the fact that there's still a lot of opportunity for growth as it seems like all parents in registration decide to come at the exact same moment and suddenly what seemed like a quiet day becomes a very chaotic day through systems and especially Power School and filling out registrations and information and all that all of a sudden. So I think there's a huge need for volunteerism in moments of high demand. Again, parent-teacher conferences and registration being a couple of those moments. I recall one of my former schools at Red Bank and the principal just sharing how heartbroken he is at times that even just regular opportunities are missed by students or parents who don't understand the language, so they don't particularly know on the daily announcement or whatever that today was the registration for volleyball, or things that may require again opportunities that may miss a chance for students to really connect with the school and parents to connect with teachers and others. So I don't want to dismiss. I mean, it is a growing population within our community that has significant impact. And what I like of hearing about the 18 and 19-year-olds is the fact that there is great opportunity for creativity. There is great opportunity for looking. We do have to acknowledge, and here's where I'll put my political, hat on or whatever, that we are also often limited by state laws as to what we can teach or can't teach, or what we can do or can't do. And I think oftentimes the public doesn't know or isn't aware of all those realities. But Diego, I know you. We've met. We've spoken. We've spoken in my previous role, and I can't say anything, but I'm very grateful for you. But boy, we're nowhere near where we need to be, and so hopefully we can really do a call to community members to, one, thank you for activism, but also we need your actions in moments of high demand. We have moments, concentrated moments of high demand that require people's presence and people's activity. And then if we were to talk about postgraduate, that's a whole different subject that is of tremendous concern to me, as many of our students don't have opportunities beyond high school. So I hope we just do better. Thank you.
Mr. Connor and Mrs. Thurman, are your comments related to this topic, or are they different? Okay, go right ahead. Okay, Mr. Connor.
So I just wanted to say, ask a question, but also say Jill's idea about having it spoken would be great in English as well, for ease and for people. But my question, so you said that there's a number that they can call. So that means that every school in Hamilton County has access to the call center number, or is it still only select schools?
So we have been working to distribute that number throughout the district. Our district lead interpreter has worked to connect with those folks requiring those support services. One of the pushes we did at the start of the school year was to work with our registrars, clerical staff, and some of the front desk staff, and share information around how they access the interpreter support services, to include that language line. We want our front desk staff to be able to, the folks that are greeting our families, to know how to access that information readily. And we have seen the uptick in the utilization of our services to include the language line.
Okay, so it is available to every school. It's whether or not they're utilizing it.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And is it possible for us to utilize that at parent-teacher conferences or at registration?
Yes, I still want to go through the process, because we're really looking at tracking the data and the utilization by language. So having it filtered, we've got a Google form set up. Maggie Johnson's contact information is readily available within that Google form as well. Folks send the information, and within that process, we set that up for them within a few days to make that happen. So we ask folks to give us a little bit of lead time to be able to make sure that we set up the language that's appropriate for those particular sessions.
Okay. Yeah. I was gonna say that seems difficult, because we've mentioned at the hospitals, when someone walks in, you have no idea who's walking in, and they happen to be from utilizing this language. You just dial up, say that I need this language and this dialect, and it's there. Is that not? We're not using the same system that the hospitals around town utilize?
We are using a similar system. We've just been utilizing the tracking process to ensure that we can keep track of what that data looks like. This is one of the initiatives that we're pushing in terms of making sure our families have access, and with the start of implementation of that process, I've had our team just really look at how we can track that more specifically. It's something that I can look into further and give you some more clarification around how we might better make that accessible to some of our folks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Thurman?
Just a simple question. How many different languages are spoken in Hamilton County schools?
115 plus dialects, 115 languages at this juncture for this school year.
Great.
Are they all given the same amount of, the same amount of services? Or are they all pretty much given the same?
So in terms of access to the languages, we have a higher incidence of particular languages within the district, and we get a lot of requests for support within those frameworks. Because some folks, because they have a non-English language background, some of them don't require those particular language supports because they have the proficiency in both languages. So we're really supporting the families that have those particular language barriers with the over-the-phone translation services. Or Maggie's also working to remotely provide supports for those particular requests. So IEPs, parent-teacher conferences, discipline, hearings, things of that nature, and really prioritizing some of those folks, some of those components so that we're getting the information to those parents in a timely manner. At the district level, in terms of translation of documents that goes out, Maggie shares that with, information is shared with her, and we translate that in those languages, make it available to folks within the district.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Thank you. I did want to give Mr. Garland an opportunity to ask his question about student safety since this is our work session. Do you want to ask that question? And then we'll wrap up our work session.
Yes, and I'll reference back. I have discovered that substitutes don't have the capability of locking their doors.
Yeah, we need to know where that is because that shouldn't be happening. The procedure should be that when a sub comes, they get a lanyard with the key on it and have access to it. So after this meeting, if you can touch base with us.
Thank you.
That was what mine was. When I'm subbing, I don't have a key to the room, but I know how to lock it. I think that there may be misinformation that substitute needs to know. And I don't think I should say it out loud what that is, but there is a way to lock the door without the key.
Either way, we can talk about it offline and get a key. You need to have a key.
Okay, great. And then Mrs. Black has a question.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I had a question for you. Just for clarification, if someone who, if a parent or guardian shows up to an office and there is a language barrier and they have questions about their student, are they able to access the language line, or do they have to wait 2 days to get approval for this tracking situation?
They're able to access the language line.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm sorry, the tracking situation threw me completely off. I was misunderstood. But there is access to them, if they show up at the school and need to have a conversation with someone. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
If the language is not available within that school at that juncture, we will provide that directed support. So the language is available to those particular families. We also leverage the International Welcome Center in that process to be able to have folks come in and fully be supported with the language piece, also the enrollment, and then looking at any particular wraparound support services that might be needed to support families as they enter healthy language.
I've visited it. It's awesome.
Great. I really want to encourage Dr. Robertson's team to think about what could a committee look like. Maybe that's something that Diego's leading, and a member of the board is involved. It sounds like there's a lot of support from this body for that, but that is not an item we would vote on. So it's an operational item. So, okay, excellent. That is the end of our work session, and we're going to take a 3-minute break. Congratulations to you guys. You sat through our work session. So we'll come back in 3 minutes.